Okay, so this is a basic training on using Safari. And first, if anybody would need to install it on another computer, your home computer, anything like that, you can go to the LACA website and go to the Fiscal Services page and scroll down, and we have a section called Additional Resources where there's a link to Safari, ODBC, downloads, and instructions. So this will prompt you to log in, and you have to log into the website with your LACA username and password, which is the same username and password that you would use to log into Bear or RAM. Depending on your district, it may also be the password that you log into your email. And then you have instructions, so you could download this guide, and it walks you through step-by-step installing the 2 programs that you have to install. And the links here are what the 2 programs that you would have to download. So also on the Fiscal Services page of the website, we don't have a link specifically for Safari documentation, but we do have some Safari documentation under the payroll page. If you scroll to the bottom, just because Safari is more commonly used by payroll, we probably should add it to the accounting page as well, but there are some instructions here that I also emailed to those who registered for this class today, the Safari ODBC on Microsoft 10 and using VLOOKUP, so I emailed those documents out. I also emailed out the Safari installation guide that we saw on that other page, so you guys have all of that with you today. The document that I am going to drive from today is the one that I emailed out that has the heading at the top called Safari ODBC Beginners Training Exercises. So if you want something in front of you, if you have that printed or if you have a second monitor, that's kind of what I am walking through today. And Safari allows you to pull data out of USAS, USPS, or EIS, but you don't start in Reflections. You actually start in Excel. So we are going to go ahead and open up a session of Excel. And you will go to the Data tab in Excel and choose External Data from Other Sources and select From Microsoft Query. Then, during the Safari installation, you map the USPS, USAS, and or EIS access, the different data sources that you have access to that you need to access using Safari. So you may not see all 3 options if you didn't map all 3, but we're going to look at all 3 options today just so you can see different types of data that you can pull out of Reflections using Safari. So first we'll look at USPS and we'll do a payroll example. And the first thing that's going to happen after you select your data source is it's going to prompt you to log in. And this is your Reflections username and password, so what you log into USAS or USPS with, because Excel is going to take this password and log into USPS using it. So I have to come down here to this command file name line and add a 2-digit code for a district because I have access to more than one district. And you will also use this line if you were trying to access a change year database. If you ever type CHGYR at a menu prompt in Reflections to get to a previous calendar year or a previous fiscal year database, then you would go on after typing your district 2-digit code, which for West Muskingum is WM, and for Maysville is MA. You would type that instead of where I have SA for sample, and then you would add a space, and you would enter the change year database that you enter when entering change year. So like I entered an example of Cal 19 to go to calendar year 19. Or if you were doing a prior fiscal year, it might be fiscal year 19. But normally when you log in, you're going to want to pull from your live database, so you're just going to leave this command file name line alone. You're going to enter your username and your password, and that's going to be it. But as you see me log into this today, I'm always going to be entering at least a 2-digit district code down here, just because I have access to more than one district database. But you enter your username and password and click OK, and then Safari is trying to connect to the Reflections USPS database right now. So once this pops up, you're going to see a query wizard box that allows you to pick a different table, whichever table you want to start from, to pull your data. So for the first example, we're going to just run through an example of creating some employee mailing labels if you had a mailing that you wanted to send out. So you could pull some information from BioScreen, which would be your biographical view here, the biographical table. But I am instead going to go pick the jobs table, because you can get that same basic information on the employee, plus you can get job number and job status and pay group, so that you have some better ways to filter to pull down just your active employees or just specific groups of employees. So I clicked the plus next to jobs, and that allows me to see the different fields that are in that table or that view. And then any that are available to me to select are on the left, and as I select them, they're going to move over here to the right, and those are the ones that are going to populate in my spreadsheet after I run this query. So first, to create mailing labels, I'm just going to pick a couple fields here. I'm going to pick last name, first name, middle initial, and I am just double-clicking on the field that I want to select. You also could highlight it and then click this arrow to send it over to the right. So either way works if you want to double click or use your arrow. And so I did the name and address fields, and now I'm picking job number, job status, and pay group, because I want to have some things to filter on so that I am not pulling out necessarily everybody in my database. I just want to pull out a limited group. And these fields are not in alphabetical order, so you might have to scroll and look for fields that you would like to have. I'm also going to scroll up and pull out year-to-date gross, so I can look at just those people who were paid this calendar year. So over here on the right, you see the list of the fields that I've selected. Each of these fields is going to become a column in my spreadsheet once this query runs. And then once you've selected everything, you can go ahead and click Next down here at the bottom. And this is your Filter tab. So if you run this query as is, it's going to pull everybody out of your database. But instead, I would like to just pull job number 1, if that's typically my active employees, and I don't want all of their other job information. And I want job status equals 1 if I just want to pull active employees. And I'm going to do pay group just to limit this so that you can see just a group of employees. And year-to-date gross is greater than 0. So you can see I selected the field that I wanted to filter on, and then I selected from the drop-down a different qualifier, and then I entered an option over here to the right of I want that pay group to equal H for that year-to-date gross to be greater than 0. So once you have your filters entered, you're going to hit Next, and the next screen allows you to select a sort, which of course you can always sort in your spreadsheet once you have the data pulled out, but sometimes it's nice to start with a sort. So you click this drop down, and I'm going to sort by last name, then first name. So these sort options are just the fields that I selected for my query. And as I pick a first sort, then it's not available to me for a secondary sort. So as you pick a sort, then you can do a third sort even if you want. And over here on the right, you can pick whether you want it to be ascending or descending. You can do as many sorts as you have selected fields to pull from your database. So once you have a sort selected, you hit next, and you are on the Finish tab. So we want to return our data to Microsoft Excel. So we hit Finish. And this screen is asking you how you want to view the data and where you want to put it. So we would like it to be a table in our spreadsheet, and we would like it to be in the existing worksheet starting in cell A1. So we're going to go ahead and click OK. And the system is going to pull the data out of reflections right now based on the filters that you put in. And so now you have a column for each of those fields we selected. You can see it's sorted by last name, then first name. And this information could be merged with a Word document to send mailing labels or some sort of information to your employees if you wanted. So that was just a very simple poll of information. So we will go ahead and run one from USAS if you want to see a basic one from USAS, unless anybody has any questions about this one. So I'm going to go ahead and open another spreadsheet and start another Safari connection. So data from external, from other sources, from Microsoft Query. And this time we are going to select USAS. It's going to prompt me to log in using my Reflections username and password. And it's connecting to the USAS database right now. And then these are the different screens that you can pull from in USAS. So we are going to pull out vendor information for mailing labels as an example. So I'm going to scroll down and find vendors and expand that and see what fields I can pull. So I'm going to select name 1 and name 2, address 1 and address 2, city, state, and zip for those mailing labels. And then in order to filter, I'm also going to pick status and year to date so that I can filter similarly to how I filtered on employees. So I'm only looking at the vendors who have been paid this year. So over on the right now, you can see all of the fields that I selected. And you can click Next. Now you're going to filter. So again, if I would hit Next and move on right now, it would pull all of the vendor information out of my USAS database. But maybe I just want to see a limited number of vendors. So I'm going to say I would like the status to equal 0. Because in USAS, active vendors have a status of a 0, whereas in payroll we saw an active job status was a 1. And that's something, if you don't know, you can always call and ask us or open a fiscal help desk ticket and ask us, or sometimes you might just run the Safari and pull all of your data out and then find a vendor, see what their status was, go back in and filter it if you're unsure and you don't want to call and ask or we're not available. But I'm going to go ahead and do status equals 0 because I know that's my active vendor status. And maybe I only want to see a few local vendors instead of all of my vendors. So I'm going to say zip code equals a couple different zip codes in my training database. And you see if I want to select more than one zip code, I have an option of and or. So, and is going to say this vendor has to have a zip code of 25914 and a zip code of 66314. But that's not the case, so I want it to be or, and you can see that kind of flipped for me, but you want to be careful to make sure you're selecting and or appropriately, or you might break your filters and then not get any results. But I'm selecting a couple of different zip codes, so I want to see any vendor that has a zip code of 25914 or a zip code of 66314 or a zip code of 55555. And you can see as I do more than 3 zip codes, which is all I saw at first, this scroll bar became available and you could just keep going. So it's like the sort option on the next tab. You can do as many filters as you would like. I'm also going to select year to date and enter greater than 1. So we want anybody who's been paid more than $1 this year. And I'm going to hit next, and let's sort by maybe zip code first and then vendor name. And next, and then OK. And then all of that vendor information is getting pulled into your spreadsheet. So you now have some vendor information that you could now merge to a Word document and create mailing labels for a mailing. So those are some very simple Safaris. Really, I think repetition helps you learn Safari, so running a couple of Safaris as trial and error to see if you can pull the data that you would like to pull would be a good way to start getting familiar and comfortable with Safari. So really today, going through these training exercises, it's just going to be repetition, so you can see different things that you can pull using Safari, and then we will talk about a couple extra options of Safari with each different example that I walk through. So we will go ahead and close out of this spreadsheet and this spreadsheet from before, and we'll open up a new workbook and do another example. So first in Excel, I'm going to go to data, external data from other sources from Microsoft Query. And we will do another payroll example. Enter my Reflections username and password. And this time we will pull a list of your staff with hire dates if you had somebody ask you for a list of hire dates. So we're going to scroll down and pull that from our job position view. So this is going to allow you to pull some information from job screen and some information from position screen. The last payroll example, we just did jobs, which was like job screen fields if you're thinking of screens and reflections. So on the job position view, I'm going to pull full name, hire date, and then I'm going to also pull some fields to help me filter. So job number, job status, maybe you want to see job title of these people that you're pulling. And then I'm going to look for pay group so I can filter on pay group as well. And then over here on the right, these are again your selected columns that are going to appear in your spreadsheet. You can reorder these if you selected them and they're not in the order that you want them to be in. So you want your columns to end up being in a different order. So we could maybe move job title. We can select it and use these up and down arrows to move it around in the list. So then your first column now is going to be full name and the second column is job title. So these are listed in the order that they will be displayed in columns from left to right in Excel. So you can move those around and get those in the order that you would like them in. Then when you have everything selected, we're going to hit next and go ahead and do some filters. Job number equals 1 to just pull active again. Nope, I'm sorry, to pull like a single job for every person so that you don't have people on here multiple times. And then job status equals 1 to just pull active jobs. And I'm going to do pay group equals H just to pull a limited number of people. And then next, we'll go ahead and sort by name. And then I hit next and finish and OK. And then you see the data that you pulled out. So all of these employees, their job titles, their hire dates, and then that information in those final columns that I used to filter. So if you were getting this spreadsheet ready to send to somebody because they asked you for a hire date or you just wanted to save it for your reference, maybe you don't want to see job number, job status, and pay group. So you could delete them from the spreadsheet and then save this. Or send it along to somebody who asked for it. Let's say you did save this and then you have somebody that asks you again for a hire date and they also want to see degree type and building description. So you can either start from scratch or you can start from this existing query and modify it. So if you want to edit a query, you go back to your data tab with a cell somewhere in this table. If your cell is outside the blue and white table, it won't recognize the table that you're in. But with your cell, one of the cells highlighted in the table, click the Data tab, and then click on Connections, and you see that here's your query selected because you're in that query. And you're going to click the Properties tab button over to the right, and then you're going to click the Definition tab and click Edit Query. So that seems like a lot of steps to edit a query, but we do have that explained in that Safari ODBC on Microsoft 2010 document that I sent out to the participants. And that document is also on the LACA website. But now you see the information that we just selected in that query. You even still see job number, job status, and pay group, even though I deleted those from my spreadsheet, they're still part of my Safari query. So if we want to add more fields, one caution here is that you can only pull fields from one view or one table. So you kind of have to remember what you pulled this from. So we pulled from job position. So we're going to go expand that again. If you were coming into this a year later and you're like, I don't know if I would have pulled this from job position or jobs, another way that you might be able to tell where you pulled it from is look over here to the columns that you selected, and one of them was full name. You no longer see full name on this list. So that might help you feel a little more comfortable that you're in the same view. If you try to work from another view or you're accidentally in the wrong view, the Safari will not pull data. So that's the only caution there, is to pull from just the one table or the one view. So we're back under job position, and we're going to add degree type and building description. So there went degree type, and then let's find building description on this list. And then we'll hit next, and we still have all of these filters in here. You could change that if you needed to change that, or if you're happy with that, you can just hit next and move on. And you can stay sorted by full name if that makes sense, or maybe now, since you have building in here, maybe you want to filter by building first, then name. So you can change anything in here that you need, and then when everything is configured, hit finish, and it actually prompts you to log in again. So because you are accessing Reflections again, you're going to need to enter your Reflections username and password again. And then we're going to close out of this pop-up window, and you now have the new information displaying on your screen. So you could save this spreadsheet and use it every year. If we want to go ahead and do that just as a demo. So once we save it, and I'll go ahead and close out and then open it again. You see when you're re-entering, re-accessing this workbook later, you see a security warning at the top that external data connections have been disabled. So in order to use this Safari again, if you want to refresh data, you would have to enable content. And depending on the version of Excel that you're in, you may get another warning that asks if you want to make it a trusted document, and you'd have to hit OK on that. And then if you need to refresh this to pull current information, that is under the Data tab, and it's this Refresh All button. So just so you can see that this would pull new data in again, I'm going to go ahead and delete Frigidaire and then refresh. It's going to ask you to log into your Reflections database again. Okay. And I typed my password wrong. And then you'll watch as this pulls the new data out. It's going to add Frigidaire back. So if you were refreshing this every year, it would pull completely up-to-date current data from your database. So those are two nice things about Safari queries, is that you can normally go back in and edit them and add more columns and change your query, and you can also save it and then refresh it to pull current data later. So do we have any questions so far?
No questions here.
Okay, so we'll just go ahead and X out of this spreadsheet and open another one. And we will go ahead and run another query out of USPS. An example would be if you had some sort of insurance survey that you had to pull out insurance information. And in this one, we're going to run the Safari from a few different tables, and then we're going to use VLOOKUP to pull the information together into one worksheet. So when I start my Safari, I'm still entering my Reflections username and password. And then I'm going to see the views available to me in payroll. And I'm going to start some information from BioScreen, so that's biographical. And on this list, you see SSN and true SSN. So SSN, if you see that, sometimes that actually is pulling the employee ID. If it says true SSN, that is actually the Social Security number. Sometimes SSN could also be the Social Security number 2, but if you see true SSN, then that is giving me a clue that this SSN is actually employee ID. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that. And then I'm also going to pull the full name and some information that your health insurance company asked for. Address fields, the employee's date of birth, marital status, and then I'm also going to pull last paid date so that I can use that as a filter. So you see all of the fields selected over here on the right that are going to end up being columns in my spreadsheet. And I'm going to hit next, enter a filter based on last paid date equals, and in my sample database, we're a couple years old, so we're back in 2015. But you would enter that in month, day, year format. So with the slashes, sometimes the dates are hard to figure out, but different screens are formatted slightly differently. But the last paid date in bio screen is month/day/year if you're using it as a filter. So I'm going to hit next, and I'm going to sort by employee ID, which is this SSN option. And then I'm going to finish, and that information is going to populate on sheet 1 of my workbook. So here's some employee information from BioScreen, and then the rest of the information that you need is from deduction screen. So let's open a new tab in your workbook by clicking this plus at the bottom. So we're on another sheet now, and we're going to run a second Safari. So data, external from other sources, Microsoft Query, USPS, my reflections, username and password. And I think I bumped that key again. So now I'm going to pull from the deduction screen. And when you scroll down to the different options for deductions, you're going to see the different types of deductions. So all of your deductions are not in one view. So you have to know what your deduction type is. So if we're pulling health insurance information, normally that's going to be an annuity. But if you scroll through here, you'll also see like direct deposit deductions, you'll see tax deductions, regular post-tax deductions. So you have to pull the right deduction type, depending on the deduction that you actually want to pull. So we're going to go from the deduction annuities screen for this example. And we're going to pull that SSN or employee ID again. So in this case, it's labeled employee ID on this view. And you also saw here true SSN versus SSN. So SSN is also most likely employee ID in this view as well. We're going to go down and pull a deduction code. And then maybe that you want to see some rate information for these employees, what they're currently paying. So we want to see the rate and the board rate and the quarter to date deducted so that you can pull just those who are currently enrolled in the health insurance. So once you have the information over here, we're going to hit next and enter some filters. So you would hopefully know your deduction code numbers at your district, and you would want to filter. You don't want to pull all annuity information, you just want your health insurance deductions. So I'm going to enter my deduction codes of 523, or 524. And again, I'm using an or instead of an and because one deduction code is not going to have two numbers, so it needs to be the either or option. And then I'm going to do quarter to date greater than 0 so that I only see people who are currently having this withholding. I'm going to hit next, and I'm going to sort by employee ID. And then this information is going to be populated in my spreadsheet. So if you have information now on two different tabs of your spreadsheet and you want to pull them together into just one worksheet, so you have your employee information, you pulled out your current employees that you wanted here. This is many employees who are contributing to the insurance right now, but we just want it based on these people who were last paid January 15, 2015 based on this filter here. We can pull the information from sheet 2 into sheet 1 using VLOOKUP. So there are a couple of different ways you can use VLOOKUP, and one method involves defining a name for your worksheet, and to me it includes a few other steps, and then I think there's a different method that is a little simpler. I can show you both methods, but so basically we'll run through this VLOOKUP twice just so you can see the different options. The one with defining the name for the sheet, I think that's the traditional way. If you take a VLOOKUP class, that's how you will be taught it. I just think the other way is a little bit simpler and easier to use. But we'll first do what, if you see in LACA documentation, is called method 1, which is the traditional naming of a sheet. So in order to pull information from sheet 2 into sheet 1, you must have both sheets sorted the same. So when I was running those safaris, I sorted both of them based on the employee ID. So that is one key whenever you're running a VLOOKUP, that both of your sheets that you need to combine have to be sorted the same. So to do the first VLOOKUP, we're going to go to sheet 2 and click this button to select the entire sheet. And on the Formula tab, we're going to click this button to define name. So you can name this anything. Typically when you're learning VLOOKUP, they tell you to name it master, and then you have the scope, which you're saying you're naming sheet 2 master. So sheet 2 is now going to be named master for use in this VLOOKUP formula, and you click OK. So then you've named sheet 2, you go back to sheet 1 where you want to pull in information from sheet 2, and on sheet 1, you are going to enter a VLOOKUP formula in the first column to the right of your table. So I'm over here in column J, and I'm on the first line that actually has employee data. So I'm in cell J2, and you can enter a formula several different ways. You can use this insert function option up at the top. You can start typing a formula, and once you click the equals, then you get a drop down up here of commonly used or recently used functions that you can select from. So either way, using this functions button or this option here pulls up your function arguments box, which helps walk you through a formula. So for VLOOKUP, you have 4 different options that you need to complete, and the first is the lookup value. So the lookup value is the cell from the current sheet that you're comparing to the other sheet to combine the data. So that's our employee ID. That's our column that we included on both spreadsheets and sorted the same so that we can link the two sheets together. So I like to point and click. You can type as well. But with your cursor in the lookup value field, I normally just click on the cell that I want to be in here. And you can see you could type A2 or it's naming it. Okay, I'm in the SSN column if you point and click. And it's also showing you over here what data it's actually seeing so you can confirm you're in the right cell. For the table array, you can click as well if you would like. You can click sheet 2 down here at the bottom of your screen, and it's going to start writing, okay, you selected sheet 2, and then you have to enter the name that we named that sheet. So we named that sheet master when we defined our name of this sheet 2. And then you need to, in the next box, enter the column, so the count of the column on the sheet that you want to pull that information in. So on sheet 2, we're trying to pull in like rate information, dollar amounts, into sheet 1. So we want, that's in column C, so if you count from left to right, A would be 1, B would be 2, C would be 3. So our column number from sheet 2 that we're trying to pull data from into sheet 1 is the third column. So I'm going to click there and type a 3, and then range lookup is always false. And what that is meaning is you only want to find exact matches. You don't want to find the closest. If there is no exact match on that second spreadsheet that matches your first spreadsheet, you want to see a blank. So false is going to tell you that. In this function arguments box explains some of those options as well if you read the wording here. But over on the right, you kind of see what we entered in the data, and it's showing you in this example on this cell, it's going to pull in a 300. And if everything seems good, we click OK, and it pulled in a bunch of information. Since we were in a table, it copied that information down. So it copied that formula down. If I click through all of these cells, you can see at the top that formula is in all of them. So, like if we wanted to go check this, we could go to sheet 2 and look up Katharine Hepburn. So her employee ID is HEPB00050. We could find that over here, HEPB0050, and her rate's $84.77. So with a formula, I pulled the information from sheet 2 from your deduction screen into your sheet 1, which was from BioScreen. So you're combining the two sheets of information together. So I'll go ahead and do another VLOOKUP in column K to pull the board rate in, but I'm going to do this slightly different. I'm not going to use that defined name of master. I'm going to do a way that I think is a little simpler, and then you guys can decide what's easiest for you. And again, you can either use your type in equals here and then select from the function, or I'll show you clicking this function and then it pulls up common, or you can search. If you don't have VLOOKUP on your list, you can search for it and it will find it. But once you get to this point, you look the same. You're in the function arguments box. So far I've started my VLOOKUP formula in the first column to the right of my table and in the first row of employee data. So I'm in K2 and I have my function arguments box open. So again, I like to point and click. So the lookup value, I'm going to click. I want to use that SSN, that employee ID, as the link between my two sheets. and then I want the table array, when I click in this box, to be sheet 2, and instead of typing master, I'm going to hold and click. I'm going to click on columns in my sheet 2, and I'm going to click and hold down my mouse button to select columns A, B, C, and D. So I'm dragging and selecting my employee ID column, so that common link between the two sheets, through and including the column that I want to return data from, so this time board rate. And as I'm doing that, I'm also keeping in mind how many columns I highlighted, 1, 2, 3, 4. So when I let go, it's filled that in for me. So the table array is populated. I didn't have to remember that my sheet was named master. I really didn't have to think. I just point and clicked. Then my column index number, as I counted, was 4. And my range lookup is always false. And for some reason, I keep typing false, so ignore that. It should just be false. And then it shows you that the resulting information is going to be $1296.97 for the first employee. Sounds good. I click OK, and since I'm in a table, this formula copied down for me. So now everybody's rate and board rate information are on this one sheet, pulled over from sheet 2. So if you wanted to get this ready to send to somebody or to keep it for your records, you could change these column titles so they mean more to you instead of just being column 1, column 2. And if you didn't want to keep these VLOOKUP formulas, if you want to convert that to actual numbers so that maybe you can run formulas in this spreadsheet, then one, you could save this and keep this as a Safari if you want to refresh it every year. But if you don't like this table and you want to have actual just plain old data, on the Design tab, you have a button called Convert to Range. So this converts a table into a normal range of cells. So it's going to get rid of the table that kind of limits your functionality in some ways, like with formulas and stuff. And it's going to take it right to a spreadsheet. So you also lost your filters, but you could add your filters back if you wanted to filter. But now you're no longer in a table. And then you could copy this information that has a formula in it, and you could paste it right over itself if you wanted as values only. So then instead of having a formula up here in the formula bar that says VLOOKUP, and if you were to ever separate these two sheets or change something accidentally on this sheet, this is preserved now as a number. And then you can add formulas if you want to add formulas, which I probably will get an error because of these NAs. So let's do a find and replace of NA with 0. And let's do replace all. And then we have a formula down here at the bottom, a total, if you were going for totals. So those are a couple tricks in Excel that help once you get your data out of reflections using Safari into Excel. You can do pretty much anything you want in Excel. You can do VLOOKUPs, formulas, find and replace, filter options, anything. So I also included in the documentation for this meeting a document called Using VLOOKUP, and it is 4 pages, and it walks you through that second method that we looked at, the one that does not include naming of the sheet. So if you are not that familiar with VLOOKUP but would like to try that on your own, you have that document to help you walk through that formula if you would like to try that. So I'm not seeing any questions in chat. Does anybody have any questions or need me to run through VLOOKUP again or anything?
I'm good, Carrie.
Okay. Then I'll go ahead and run another Safari and pull some information out of USAS this time. So we'll go ahead and close out of this spreadsheet. Open another new workbook and start another Safari with my data tab, external data from other sources, from Microsoft Query, and we will pull some information out of USAS again. So this is my Reflections username and password. And we will pull out some budget account information so that you can look at all of your budget accounts and look at maybe some old accounts that you might want to change the account status from active to inactive. So if you're trying to clean up your accounts, maybe inactivating accounts as you get ready to move to the redesign, or your treasurer may want to do this each year just to inactivate accounts so that people are not selecting old accounts on requisitions and purchase orders and pay accounts and all that good stuff. So we're going to pull this from the budget account table. So budget underscore accounts, I'm going to expand that. And we're going to pull all of the dimensions of the account, including the transaction indicator. So transaction indicator, fund, function, object, special cost, subject, OPU, instructional level, and job. And we'll also pull the description, and maybe you like seeing description that maybe means more to you, so we'll go ahead and select it and move it to the top so that it's the first column in our spreadsheet. And we'll also select some more fields over here at the left. We'll select initial budget, fiscal year to date, actual expended, current encumbered, and we'll look for fiscal year to date unencumbered. We'll also look for status, since that's what we're wanting to review, the account status and possibly change it and update that in our records. So maybe since we want to be focused on status, maybe we want that up near the beginning as well. So it's very easy to reorganize your columns so that they will see once the status dumped into the spreadsheet, these will be columns A and B. So once you have all of your columns selected, then we hit next and we enter some filters. We want a status of active, and for accounts, the active status is A, and it is case sensitive, so that's a capital A. And then maybe we want to look at funds beginning with 5, so all of your 500, all of your federal grant funds, and any special cost center equaling 9216. So in my database, I pulled an older special cost center that was used in FY16, and I want to review these accounts and possibly inactivate them. So once you have your filters entered, you can see which fields you're filtering on as well, because they're bolded over here on the left. So you can review your filters, or you can continue adding other filters if you had other options you wanted to filter by. We hit next, and we're going to sort by the account. So by each dimension of the account, I'm going to start in that order: transaction indicator, then fund, then function, and I'm going to scroll down and keep using more boxes: object, special cost center, subject, OPU, instructional level, and job. So you can see as I'm selecting these, my list is getting shorter, and that's because I've already selected the options above as a sort. So you can sort by as many fields as you would like. So then we're going to hit next and return the data to this spreadsheet. And so now you are looking at all of these accounts that have a special cost center of 9216, but they still have an active status. And you can see if you scroll over here, most of them don't have any dollar amounts associated with them. Nothing has anything expended this fiscal year or unencumbered or initially budgeted this fiscal year. There's just a little bit of unencumbered balance that carried over. But you could review this and decide if you wanted to keep these accounts with inactive status or if you wanted to inactivate them. If you wanted to inactivate them, you could either go one by one and log into Reflections or use SLab and modify the status, or you could make the change in this spreadsheet and transfer it into Reflections and very quickly mass update all of your accounts. So this is true with many screens in Reflections, both USAS and USPS. You can start with a spreadsheet, make changes, and load the information back in to quickly make updates and changes to your system. So if we wanted to quickly inactivate all of these, I'm going to change my status to an I on all of these. So then you just have to make sure your column headers have the correct names, and most of the information that you pull out of Safari is going to have the correct name, but a few fields you actually need to change the column header in order to successfully upload it back into the system. So one of those that you need to change is the transaction indicator. In order to successfully upload, it has to just be TI. The operational unit has to be OPU if you want to upload this information. And the status needs to actually be status. I don't know if you noticed that when I was pulling it out of Safari, it just said stat. But so I've changed those headings so that they're in the right naming format that is needed to load the information into Reflections. And then before you upload any information into Reflections, if you're making mass updates, we always recommend you delete the dollar amount columns in case somebody has posted a transaction. Since you pulled this information out, you're not overwriting dollar amounts with incorrect, out-of-date dollar amounts. So if you wanted to transfer this into Reflections and update your account status on all of these very quickly, we would have to save it as a CSV in order for Reflections to accept it. So we're going to select a type of CSV, comma, delimited. And we'll just name this Inactivate Test. You might get a couple warning messages saying if you're going to a CSV, you're losing certain formatting and certain abilities. And so if you wanted to preserve this spreadsheet for any reason, you'd want to save it as an Excel spreadsheet first before saving it as a CSV. But I'm just going to go ahead and only save it as a CSV. And then I'm going to go into Reflections. And when I'm at a menu prompt, I am going to transfer that file into Reflections. So I'm going to click my file transfer button and navigate to where I saved that file. So on the left side of the screen, I am finding where I saved the file. I put it in my downloads, and then once this downloads folder opens, all of my downloads should appear under the local file names, and then I'm going to find that CSV file called inactivate test. Okay, so here's my inactivate test. I'm going to select that, and then I'm going to send it from the local on the left to the host on the right, and that's going to transfer the file from my downloads folder into Reflections. So then we'll close out of that file transfer, and now that CSV file is in Reflections and available for me to use, I'm going to go to USA Load on the menu, or at the menu prompt, I'm going to type USA Load. You can also find it in the menu as an option on the menu. But I am going to select the option number 2, Account Load. And so you enter the name of the import file that whatever you named that CSV file and transferred into Reflections. So there's inactivate test. It is a format of a CSV. Do you want to update existing account records, yes or no? And yes, we do, because all of those account records exist. Do you want to update the account file or run a report only? This is like a projection or actual option, so report only is like a projection. And then it's telling you that your error report file is going to be named accountload.txt. So I'll just run this as a report option right now. And you can see on my screen that I did not get any rejected records, and I had 102 valid records, 102 records processed. I'm going to click Continue, exit out of here, and view accountload.txt. And there's only one warning, which is probably on that title line, because I didn't have anything rejected. So this would be telling me that my report projection looks good, and I could run this in actual if I wanted to inactivate all of those 102 accounts very quickly. So Safari is very useful in pulling data out to make minor changes and then loading the data back in. So I am not going to run this in actual, but if you wanted to, if you were doing this in your real live files and you wanted to, you would just go back into account load, change the R from report to U for update, and execute it. And then that would instantly update all of those account statuses. Okay, so that was an example from USAS of being able to quickly pull information, make changes, and load it back in. We can look at a similar payroll example that you may want to do each year to review information, possibly make changes, and load it back in. So if I close out of this and open a new Excel workbook, and start another Safari from data, external data from other sources, Microsoft Query, USPS, Reflections username and password, and then we will pull out payroll information so that you can see every employee's building IRN, fund source code, and pay account, and then compare amongst those columns. So if somebody moves around from building to building, maybe you updated the building IRN but forgot to update the pay account, or vice versa. This is a good cross-check amongst those different fields that frequently change as people move around within your district. So in order to pull this information, we're going to find the pay account job info table. So this one right here, I'm going to click the plus next to it, and then I'm going to start pulling out some fields. So if you want to load information back in, like we just loaded information back into accounting, in payroll there are, you're most likely always going to need the employee ID. There are possibly other fields that are required. On USAS, like when we were loading into accounts, all of the different dimensions of the accounts were required in order to update the accounts. There is information in the manual explaining for the different screens, depending on what you're loading to, which fields are required that you have to include in your spreadsheet in order to load the information back in. So the easiest way is to start in your Safari and go ahead and include those columns. So if you want to walk through this, we have some examples on our spreadsheet or on our website under the accounting documentation and payroll documentation of different processes you can run throughout the year to clean up your database, or these Safari examples. But if you're working on one and you don't know which columns you need to include, feel free to reach out to us and we can help you look that up so that you have the right columns so that you can make changes and then successfully upload the information back in. So we're going to go ahead and pull some fields that are required in order to get the information back into payroll, but some fields that we want to use to filter on, and some fields that we will actually want to be able to review and update. So we have employee ID, full name, job number, account counter, which is from pay screen, the fund, SCC, function, object, subject, OPU, instructional level, and job, so all those different dimensions of the pay account. The from pay screen also percent, and whether that pay account is set up as fixed or percent. The account status, fiscal year to date amount paid, so that we can filter to only see the accounts that are being paid currently. And I'm looking for job status. Job title, building and department, building IRN, fund source code and fund source percent, and then we'll use pay group to filter on, which might be back up higher. So once you have all of your fields selected, we will go, you can rearrange them if you want. Maybe you want to move job title up near name. If I click the right button, so that you can quickly see what job this person is doing. but we then can go to the next tab and filter. We want to filter on account status equals A if we just want to see active accounts, and job status equals 1 if we just want to see active jobs. You could filter on building IRN if you want to just look at one building at a time, or we'll just go ahead and pull everything out. I am going to filter on pay group though, just to limit my results a little bit more. And then I will sort by employee ID and job number. And then when the information gets pulled into the spreadsheet, you could easily save this spreadsheet and then open it up and refresh it every year to pull in the new information every fall after you update everybody's changes and they've moved from building to building or changed positions. And then you could use this spreadsheet to review and compare to make sure everything was updated accurately as people move around. So this column K is OPU. That OPU a lot of times means a building to you as a district, and you could compare that to the building code that you assigned in job screen. So this OPU is pulling from pay screen, and this building is pulling from job screen, so you can make sure that those are in agreement. And you can find the building IRN also from job screen and make sure it's in agreement so that you can make sure you didn't miss anything as you were updating staff as they moved from job to job. You can also verify department code and make sure it's still correct. You could keep in mind that we ran this for only active jobs, so you could review this list and make sure, like here, like if somebody's on here more than once, should they be on here more than once? Are they on here more than once because their pay account is split and they're getting paid part through one pay account and part through another account? Or are they on here twice because you forgot to inactivate their old job when they took a new job? You can verify the instructional level if your district uses that as part of the pay account to identify the grade level in case people moved amongst grades. You can make sure you updated the job title if people were moving around. You can verify the fund source, which is over here further to the right. We have a couple people in this sample database that don't even have a fund source, and that's important for EMIS to identify where they're getting paid from. So the fund source and the fund percent, that is from job screen. If you're not as familiar with that, there is a teacher that's being paid 100% out of local funds. So this field down here, it doesn't really impact where their pay is actually charged, but it is used for EMIS reporting. So I went down to the bottom and hit F7 for help so you can see there are many different options available for this fund code. You pick the appropriate one and you have to identify if 100% is charged to that or if it's 50-50, but it's a nice way to review and compare this to the actual pay account that you're charging and make sure that this fund source has been updated when you updated a pay account. So if you wanted to review this spreadsheet every year and you found errors, you could make the corrections right here in this spreadsheet. You could then save it as a CSV and load it back into Reflections using the file transfer button that we used when we did the example in USAS. And then for payroll, you have the USP load options to load into the various different screens. So if you were making changes in that spreadsheet, remember we pulled that from a view that pulled some information from pay screen, some information from job screen. Maybe you would make changes and then load this spreadsheet twice, once updating job screen and once updating pay screen. So you would select the desired option. After transferring your CSV file in, enter the name of your import file, update existing records, yes, because all of those employee records already exist in the database, and import your changes. So it's a nice way to quickly review and update records. So I don't see any questions in chat. And the next example that we have is for equipment inventory. We mentioned that you could use Safari not only for USAS and USPS, but also to pull information out of EIS. So if either of your districts use EIS, this could be very helpful because searching in EIS is not very user-friendly at times. So sometimes extracting all of your information using Safari into a spreadsheet and then searching in the spreadsheet is a lot more user-friendly. Or searching by using those filters in Safari might be user-friendly for you. So we'll just run one example for equipment inventory so that you can see what this would look like. So I opened a new Excel workbook and I'm going to access the Data tab, External from Other Sources, Microsoft Query, select my EIS data source, enter my Reflections username and password. And then I'm going to, once this pops up and we see all of the different views that are available in equipment inventory, I'm going to scroll down and select the items table. So we'll expand that and select the inventory tag, the item description, the serial number and model number, because that might be helpful as you're searching for different items, item category, location category, and location number. And then I'll hit next. And then you can use these filters to filter your information down if you're looking for a certain item, or you could just hit next and return all of your item information to a spreadsheet and then use that spreadsheet to search and filter. But if you wanted to see a couple different filter options, you could filter on description, if you were maybe looking for a certain type of item, but you don't have that tag number, so you can't find it in EIS, then let's do contains. So the description contains tractor or contains and Safari is case sensitive, so we'll just type it in here a couple of different ways and then hit next. We'll sort by inventory tag number, next, finish, and into cell A1. And this will pull out everything in my equipment inventory database that part of the description contains the name or the word tractor. So if you had a tractor that, of course, you probably didn't stick an inventory tag on, but you were trying to find that tag number that was assigned, then reviewing this list might help you find that. So you could save this Safari and then access it later, and you could re-access the Safari, go to Connections and edit this query like we have edited other queries today to change your filters. Or like I said, it might also, you might just want to extract all of your equipment inventory records without putting any filters. But if we were done with this one, if you scroll up and clear this filter out, then you'll see that description is no longer bolded, so you're no longer filtering on description, and you could filter on another option to find another item that you were looking for. So if you were looking for like a computer and you knew the serial number, but you didn't know the tag number, you could edit that query and go in and find it. It's going to re-prompt you to log in since it's accessing your database again. And then there you've found that computer based on a serial number. And in the EIS software, you can't search based on serial number or model number. So if you don't know that tag number, getting the information into a spreadsheet might be easier for you to find that, or using those filters in Safari like I was demoing right there. So if you use state software EIS, that tool might be helpful for you. Okay, so I think we're down to our last example. It is an example in USAS, so I'll go ahead and close out of this and open a new workbook. Start another Safari from USAS, enter my Reflections username and password. And we'll pull out some 1099 information on your vendors so that you can review all of the vendors that are in your database and possibly locate and clean up duplicate records. So this, again, would be a good thing to do regularly or in anticipation of moving to the redesign. It would be good to review your vendor information. So I'm going to scroll down and expand the vendors table. I'm going to select vendor number, vendor name, status, the 1099 flag and the SSN 1099, the year-to-date total, category, created date, and vendor TIN type. So let's filter on status equals 0 to just see active vendors. And flag 1099 does not equal 0, which the 0 on the 1099 flag identifies non-1099 vendors. So this is if you wanted to look at only your 1099 vendors. It's saying let's look at anything other than the vendor that's marked non-1099. So those other options, 1 through 6, are like non-employee compensation, attorney's fees, those different options, the 1099 options when you're building a vendor. So we're going to say anything other than non-1099, and you could do year-to-date total is greater than $599.99 to see just those vendors who are actually at a point in time this year to receive a 1099 if you wanted to look first at only your 1099 vendors. We'll sort by name and finish and see what information pulls out here from our test database. So if you're working on cleaning up your vendors for moving to another software like redesign, maybe you wouldn't want to filter down as much as I did, but the filters I gave you an example of were more like if you wanted to review your vendors before printing 1099s. So you could do this every year. These are the vendors currently in my database that would be marked and based on the dollar amount would be receiving a 1099 at this point in time in the year. So you could then review this information to see what's incomplete. I have a couple tax IDs that are blank because they're displaying as all zeros. I maybe used this category in my software to track whether or not I had a W-9, so I might need to look and see if I have W-9s on these other vendors because I didn't mark that I did. And I'm also missing the vendor TIN type on a couple of these vendors. So this is an example of some vendors that might need a little attention before printing 1099s. So if you wanted to look for duplicate tax IDs as well, like if you were looking either at your 1099 vendors or all of your vendors and trying to clean up to get ready to go to the redesign, you can use a feature in Excel to help you identify those duplicates. So we're going to select this column that has the tax ID or the Social Security number, and we're going to, on the Home tab, select Conditional Formatting and pick Highlight Cell Rules and click on Duplicate Values. So we want Excel to highlight duplicate values. And then it's asking us how do we want those values to be identified. So whether you can kind of see behind you what it's doing. The cell is shaded red with red text, or maybe you just want red text and that's good enough. And click OK, and now the system has identified those duplicate values for you. So then you can also click this filter drop down in the SSN or tax ID column, and you can filter by color and filter by the color that you just used for your duplicate values, and you quickly now have a list to see all of your vendors that have duplicate tax IDs. So you can review those and determine if you possibly need to use the Vend Change program in Reflections to merge these vendors, or if you have a tax ID wrong, these ones that are all zeros, again, they're just missing tax IDs. So this would be helpful for you in reviewing your vendor information, and if you wanted to make any corrections in this spreadsheet and then load the information into Reflections using USA Load, there's an option called Vend Load. We first would have to, after making your changes, we would have to update the column headings because they're not 100% accurate for a re-import either. Vendor number would need to be vendor. Name _1 in order to successfully import would just need to be name 1, name 2, and the flag 1099 would need to be 1099 type. The SSN _1099 would need to be 1099 ID, and the vendor TIN type needs to be TIN _type. So those are all in that document for you too if you want to run this Safari, make changes and import the information back in. You would make those changes to your headings. I would advise you remove any columns that contain dollar amounts in case somebody has processed a check or voided a check since you pulled this information out. You don't want to overwrite your dollar amount information in the system. You would then save it as a CSV. You would go into Reflections, use your file transfer option to transfer the CSV file in, and then you would go to USA Load, select the Venload option. Enter the name of your import file, whatever you named that CSV. Say, yes, my column headings are included. Yes, we want to update existing vendor records. And then I would advise you run this as a report only, which is like projection, before coming back in here and running U for update, which is like actual. So that is a quick way to review your vendor records and possibly update them. So any questions about those examples that were demoed today, or anything you would like to see again, or anything that you were expecting to see that you didn't?
Carrie, is there a resource we can use to find out what the column titles should look like?
So if you go to the LACA website and go to the Fiscal Services page and go to under Software Manuals and User Guides, there's the USAS, USPS, and EIS manual. You would select whichever one you were in, so whether you're in USAS, EIS, or USPS. And I believe it's in the reference manual, but I normally, once I open up any manual, I normally navigate and search for what I'm looking for. So like if we were to look for USA Load, and here's the USA Load import program, it's going to explain all of those screens and all of those options. And then here's the vendor criteria. So it's telling you a description and the required column description. So it's telling you, like in that one example, we changed stat to status, and I just changed name _ 1 to name 1. So here's that required column description. And it also, if you see anything bolded, that means that field is required. So where I mentioned that certain, like in the payroll side, your employee ID is required, and when we were working with accounts, the different dimensions of the accounts were required. If you're working with vendors, this is telling me that the vendor number is required and the vendor name 1 field is required in order to successfully upload using this program. And that's all explained right here in this paragraph. So if you go to the manual from the link on our website and then search for USA Load, or if you were in payroll, USP Load, it would give you the then load criteria, the account load criteria, the different criteria that you would need. And if you're having any trouble with that, you can always call and ask us and we can help you with that too. But that's the quickest way, that's how I go about finding that information.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So as you try a couple safaris with your district data, if you run into issues or have questions, feel free to let us know. And just remember, if you're running a safari, you can only pull from one table or one field at a time. If you need to pull from more than one table, VLOOKUP is your friend in combining that information into one spreadsheet once you get the data out with multiple different safaris. When you're using your filters in Safari, remember some of those were case sensitive. So if you put in some filters and you get no data and think you should have, go back in and edit that query and try uppercase or lowercase, or maybe take the filter out and then see the resulting information and then add your filters again, or add your filters in the spreadsheet. Or if you're wanting to build a Safari that you can use over and over again, make sure you save it as a spreadsheet so that that table is accessible so that you can refresh it year after year. So it really can be helpful for you to quickly pull data out, to review data, to make changes and upload it back in. Whenever you're uploading information into Reflections, you have to save it as a CSV. whereas when you're trying to preserve that table for Safari, you're saving it as an Excel spreadsheet. But if you give this a try and have any questions, you can call or email fiscal@laca.org. And you also have the handouts that I provided for this training, which would hopefully be helpful through the process too. But that's all I had prepared today, unless there are more questions. Well,
Lindsay and Kelly, you're a very quiet group.
Yep. I appreciate you guys joining today, and hopefully you got something out of that today.
It was very informative. Thank you.
You're welcome. Try to enjoy this nice rainy day. Oh, there's a comment from Lindsay before I close down. She said thank you as well. So both of you have a nice afternoon. Thank you for joining us, and take care.